I was just making my morning coffee, a regular Tuesday, when my phone buzzed. My brother Owen's text, "Sold your piano. We need the money." My piano? I felt a cold dread, but what I learned about its real worth, $2.8 million, made me truly speechless, especially when I showed up at their door. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. My small apartment, with its mismatched furniture and piles of books, always felt like a warm hug, a safe spot just for me. But the heart of it, the real beating heart, was the old upright piano tucked into the corner. It wasn't fancy, not at first glance anyway. The wood was dark and worn smooth in places from generations of hands, and some of the keys had a faint yellow tinge. Dad always said it had been in our family for ages, passed down from my great-grandmother. It wasn't just furniture, it was a memory keeper. Every scratch, every slightly out-of-tune note, told a story. I'd learned to play on it, plinking out simple tunes, then more complicated ones as I grew. Even when times got tough, when money was tight and I wondered how I'd pay rent, I never thought of selling it. It was my anchor, a quiet, solid reminder of home and history, especially after Mom and Dad passed away, leaving Owen and me to navigate the world alone. Owen, my older brother, was different. He'd always chase the next big thing, the quick fix. He was good at making plans, not so good at seeing them through. Since our parents died, our relationship had become a bit thin, like old fabric. We talked, but not really. It felt like we were always circling around unspoken things, mostly money problems on his side, and my quiet resentment over how little he seemed to care about our shared past. His wife, Chloe, she was Chloe. Pretty, always worried about appearances, and seemed to think a new car or a bigger house would solve everything. They lived in a nice house in the suburbs, always a little bit beyond their means, it seemed. That morning, as I said, started normal. The smell of coffee was just beginning to fill my kitchen, the sun was peeking through my window, and I was looking forward to a quiet day of work. Then my phone buzzed. Owen's name popped up, which was already a bit unusual for a text during working hours. I tapped it open, expecting a quick, "How are you?" or maybe a link to some online thing he thought was funny. Instead, the words hit me like a cold splash of water. "Sold your piano. We need the money." I stared at it. My brain just stopped. Sold my piano? No, he couldn't have. It was a joke, right? A really bad, insensitive joke. I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. A strange numbness washed over me, then a tremor started in my hands, making my coffee cup rattle on the counter. My piano. The one I loved. The one I played every night to unwind. The one that was a piece of my family. I didn't text back. I couldn't. My fingers felt clumsy, useless. Instead, I called him. It rang once, twice. Then he picked up, his voice sounding a little harried, like he was in a hurry. "Hey, Alara. What's up?" he asked, too casually. "What's up?" I repeated, my voice tight, barely a whisper. "Owen, what was that text?" "About the piano." There was a pause, a short, uncomfortable silence on his end. "Oh, that. Yeah, well, things are a bit tight right now, you know? Chloe and I tight?" I cut him off, my voice finally finding some strength, though it shook. "You sold my piano because things are tight?" "It was just an old piano, Alara," he said, and I could hear the dismissive tone, the one that always made my blood boil. It was just sitting there, taking up space in Mom and Dad's old house. We decided to clear it out. Clear it out. I cried, my voice rising. "Owen, that piano was mine. Dad specifically said it was for me, that it was a family heirloom. You had no right." "Look, you weren't using it," he argued, his voice getting defensive now. "And we really needed the cash. It wasn't worth much anyway, just some old thing. Got a few $100 for it, helped with some bills. You should be happy I got rid of it for you. A few $100. For something priceless to me. He thought he'd done me a favor." My stomach twisted with a mix of anger and a deep, cutting hurt. This wasn't just about money, or even the piano itself. This was about Owen, my own brother, taking something that was deeply personal to me, something that was a connection to our parents, and selling it off like junk without a second thought. and then acting like I was the unreasonable one. "A few $100, I whispered, the words tasting bitter. "Owen, you don't understand. No, you don't understand, Alara," he snapped. "We're in a tough spot. Sometimes you have to make hard choices. It's just a piano. Get over it." He hung up. Just like that. The line went dead, leaving me in my quiet apartment, the scent of coffee now tasting like ash. My piano. Gone. And Owen, my brother, had dismissed it as just an old piano. Humiliation burned in my chest. He had sold a piece of my soul for what he considered pocket change, and made me feel small for even caring. How could he? How could my own brother do something so utterly heartless? I stood there, phone still in hand, feeling like I'd been kicked, like the floor had dropped out from under me. Tears blurred my vision, not just for the piano, but for the brother I thought I knew, the family bond that now felt irrevocably broken. For days after Owen's call, I moved through life in a fog. Work felt impossible. Eating was a chore. All I could think about was the piano and Owen's words, just an old piano, a few $100. Each time, a fresh wave of hurt washed over me. I tried to play my portable keyboard, but it just wasn't the same. It felt empty, lifeless, a poor substitute for the deep, resonant tones of my piano. I missed the way the old keys felt under my fingers, the subtle creak of the pedals, even the faint smell of old wood and dust. It was more than music, it was a connection to my family, a part of me. One evening, staring blankly at my laptop, a little flicker of something, stubbornness, anger, started to glow. Just an old piano, he'd said. But was it? I remembered Dad talking about it, not just as an heirloom, but with a certain reverence. He'd sometimes say things like, "They don't make them like this anymore, Alara. This one's special." I always thought he meant special to us, because of its history in our family. But what if he meant truly special? I started digging. First, I looked through old family photos. There it was, in faded black and white, then in sepia, then in color, always in the background, a silent sentinel of our lives. I found one from my great-grandmother's house, with her tiny hand resting on its polished surface. I zoomed in, trying to find any markings. Nothing clear. Then I remembered something Dad had mentioned once, way back. Your great-grandpa, he had quite an eye for things. Got this piano in Europe, brought it back after the war. A real journey it had. Europe? That sparked something. Most pianos from that era in America were made here. If it came from Europe, especially post-war, it might have a unique story, a different maker. I typed rare antique European pianos into the search bar. The internet was a rabbit hole, full of information I didn't understand, serial numbers, different types of wood, specific manufacturing periods. My head started to ache. It felt like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and I almost gave up. But then I saw a forum post, something about identifying pre-World War II European pianos. The post mentioned looking for a specific kind of maker's mark, usually hidden inside the piano, near the soundboard, or sometimes on the frame. It talked about certain brands that had very limited production, especially during specific historical periods, making them incredibly valuable. I took a deep breath. I didn't have the piano anymore, but I had a memory, a feeling. I started sketching it out, trying to remember every detail, the intricate carvings on the legs, the shape of the music stand, even the specific shade of its dark finish. I found a website for antique piano appraisers and restoration experts. It seemed like a long shot, but I had to try. I filled out a contact form, attaching my rough sketch and a detailed description based on my memories, including Dad's vague story about its European origins. A few days later, an email popped up from a Mr. Peterson. He was an older gentleman. His email was polite and a bit formal. He said my description was intriguing and asked if I had any photographs, even old ones. I sent him every photo I had, from the blurry ones of my great-grandmother to clear ones of me as a child, sitting at the bench. He replied quickly, saying the piano had a distinctive profile. He asked about specific measurements, which I had to guess based on my old apartment photos, and if I knew a serial number. I didn't, but I told him where I remembered seeing a small metal plate, vaguely, inside near the pedals. Then came the wait. What? Moment. A phone call from Mr. Peterson. His voice, usually calm and measured, was tinged with excitement. "Miss Alara," he began, "I've been doing some deep research. Based on your descriptions and cross-referencing with some very old databases and auction records, there's a possibility, a strong possibility, your piano isn't just an old family heirloom." My heart started to pound. "What do you mean, Mr. Peterson?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The carvings you described, the specific dark finish, the dimensions, and particularly the European provenance," he explained, "point to a very rare, early 20th century model from a renowned, but short-lived, Austrian manufacturer. They made fewer than 100 of these before the war stopped production. Most were destroyed. Only a handful are known to exist." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "How rare?" He paused, then said, "Miss Alara, if this is indeed the piano I suspect it is, a verified model in good condition, we're not talking hundreds. We're talking millions. The last one sold at a private auction nearly 10 years ago for just over $2.5 million. With inflation and the rarity, it could easily be worth $2.8 million, possibly more. $2.8 million. The numbers swam in my head. Million. My brother had sold that piano for a few $100. The humiliation I felt before was nothing compared to the shock and cold fury that now washed over me. Owen hadn't just carelessly sold my piano. He had unwittingly sold a fortune, dismissing it as junk. He hadn't known, of course, but that made his actions even worse in a way. He didn't even care enough to check. My just an old piano was a priceless masterpiece, a hidden treasure. The world suddenly tilted on its axis. My despair wasn't just about a lost heirloom anymore. It was about a monumental injustice, a theft of unimaginable scale. This wasn't just sadness, it was war. The news from Mr. Peterson left me breathless. Then slowly, it hardened something inside me. $2.8 million. Owen had been so dismissive, so flippant, about selling what he thought was a worthless old instrument. He'd done it for a few $100, probably to cover some overdue bill he'd forgotten about. The thought of it, the sheer magnitude of his mistake and his disregard for my feelings, stoked a cold, steady fire in my gut. This wasn't just about an old piano anymore. It was about a deep betrayal, a profound injustice. I knew then that I couldn't just let it go. Mr. Peterson had been incredibly helpful. He explained that locating such a rare instrument wouldn't be easy, but also that its true value meant it couldn't simply disappear. He gave me contacts for a specialized antique instrument tracing service and also recommended a lawyer. "You'll need proper legal counsel, Miss Alara," he'd said gently, "especially since the family ownership aspect is clear, but the sale was not authorized." I contacted Mrs. Albright, a lawyer specializing in estate and property disputes. She was sharp, no nonsense, and after I explained everything, her eyebrows nearly hit her hairline. "Your brother sold an inherited asset without your consent, likely under market value, and certainly without disclosing its true nature," she stated, her voice calm but firm. "That's a significant issue, Alara. Especially with that kind of value." She asked about our parents' will. Thankfully, Dad had been meticulous. The will explicitly stated the piano was bequeathed to me. We had the official documentation, the signed papers. This was my authentic deed. It wasn't a deed for the piano itself, but the legal document from the estate proving ownership. This was my trump card. Mrs. Albright also advised getting a formal, updated appraisal for the piano once it was located. She warned me it wouldn't be simple. The innocent buyer would be caught in the middle. Owen and Chloe would likely deny everything or try to minimize it. But we had a strong case. Meanwhile, I quietly hired the tracing service Mr. Peterson recommended. It took a few weeks, but they found it. Owen had indeed sold it to a small, local antique shop that mostly dealt in furniture and knickknacks. The shop owner, an honest man named Mr. Davies, had thought it was a lovely old piano, but hadn't recognized its true worth either. He had sold it on to a collector who specialized in vintage musical instruments, a woman in another state who truly appreciated its history and beauty, thankfully. She was initially surprised, but understood the situation once Mrs. Albright explained it. She was, understandably, upset to learn she had unknowingly bought a stolen asset, but she was a fair person and open to a legal resolution. The path was complicated, but clear. The day came. I hadn't spoken to Owen since that phone call a month ago. Mrs. Albright had advised me to keep quiet, to gather all my facts and proof before making a move. It was hard, but I did it. I felt a knot of dread mixed with righteous anger. It wasn't just about getting my piano back. It was about Owen finally facing the consequences of his careless, self-serving actions. It was about standing up for myself, for my family's history, and for what was right. This wasn't revenge in the cruel sense, but a demand for justice. Mrs. Albright was with me when I drove to Owen and Chloe's house. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel. I saw Owen's car in the driveway, a newer model than they should probably afford. Chloe's prize-winning roses bloomed in the garden. Everything looked perfect, normal. We walked up to the door. I rang the bell. Owen opened it, looking surprised, then annoyed. "Alara? What are you doing here?" He glanced at Mrs. Albright, frowning. "Who's this?" "This is Mrs. Albright, my lawyer," I said, my voice steady, though my heart hammered. His eyes widened, then narrowed. "A lawyer? What in the world?" Chloe appeared behind him, her face full of concern. "Owen," I continued, "we need to talk about the piano." He scoffed. "Oh, for goodness sake, Alara, are you still on about that? I told you, we needed the money. It's done. Over." "No, Owen," I said, holding up a thick envelope. Inside was a copy of Dad's will, the estate documents, and Mr. Peterson's detailed appraisal, formally valuing the piano at $2.8 million. "It's not done. You sold my piano, an heirloom valued at almost $3 million, for a few $100, without my permission, and without even bothering to find out what it was truly worth." I watched his face. First, confusion. Then, disbelief. A small, choked laugh escaped him. "Million? What are you talking about? It was an old, dusty piano. You're crazy." "No, Owen. You're mistaken," Mrs. Albright interjected, her voice calm but authoritative. "Alara is the rightful owner of that piano, as per your parents' will. And this document," she tapped the envelope, "is a formal appraisal confirming its immense value. You committed theft, Owen, of a nearly $3 million asset." Chloe gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Owen's face, usually so expressive, went blank. His jaw dropped, his eyes fixed on the numbers on the appraisal. His breath hitched. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His face flushed, then turned pale. He was utterly, completely speechless. The man who always had an excuse, a quick comeback, was silent, truly silenced by the enormity of his actions and their consequences. Chloe looked from the document to Owen, then back to me, pure horror in her eyes. The humiliation I had felt now reflected in their stunned faces, amplified 1,000 times. The silence was heavy, thick with their shock and the dawning realization of what he had done. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings. The collector, a kind woman, agreed to return the piano once her purchase price was refunded, with the agreement that I would pay her a small appreciation for her care. Owen and Chloe, facing potential legal action for unauthorized sale and negligent handling of an estate asset, crumbled. Their financial troubles were laid bare, far worse than I'd imagined, and Owen's reckless sale of my piano had only made them exponentially worse. He had to take out a loan, selling off many of his possessions, to pay back the antique shop owner and cover legal fees. Our relationship, already fragile, was irrevocably shattered. There was no going back. I eventually got my piano back. It was stunning, even more so now that I knew its true story. I had it properly restored, learning even more about its journey. It stood proudly in my living room, not just a beloved heirloom, but a symbol of my fight, my resilience. The money from its appraisal meant I was financially secure, more than I could have ever dreamed. I used some of it to secure my future and set up a small foundation in my parents' names, supporting young musicians. Owen and Chloe faded from my daily life. I heard they moved to a smaller place, that Owen was working 2 jobs, trying to dig himself out of the hole he dug. It wasn't the revenge I had fantasized about, not a cruel gloating. It was simply justice, a restoration of balance. And in that, I found a profound peace. I had stood up for myself and for the legacy of my family. It was hard, seeing my brother brought low, knowing that our family bond was broken beyond repair. But what choice did he leave me? He chose to disrespect me, to steal from me, to dismiss something I cherished. And in doing so, he taught me a hard but valuable lesson, that sometimes, standing up for what's yours, even when it means hurting those you love, is the only way to truly reclaim your own dignity and worth. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about finding my voice, holding my ground, and showing them that even the quiet sister could roar when pushed. This experience, it changed me. It opened my eyes to the true worth of things, not just in dollars, but in history, in sentiment, in how we treat each other. It was a harsh awakening, a painful journey, but I emerged stronger, more confident, and with a deeper understanding of who I am and what I stand for. I often think about that text, that ordinary Tuesday, and how a moment of thoughtless greed revealed a hidden fortune, forcing me to confront betrayal and find my own strength. So, tell me in the comments, what's something valuable that was almost lost to you?